Yo. How we doing? This is the newest episode of Team on 3. Making this episode on a Saturday. A lot of NBA games today, but how we doing? How we feeling? Feeling right? I've been trying to figure out what some stuff I want to talk about more and how I want to approach having content or having like stuff to talk about on YouTube twice a week at least. And so I've just been kind of thinking of things to like take away from the season, basically. Like when I watch games, because it's different basketball now. Like you're at the point in the season right now where every team is playing for different reasons. Like you have teams that are still playing really hard to try to kind of like match seeding, or get a better, playoff seed so they can play at home. You have teams who are not really playing anyone anymore. Like you have teams like the 76ers who are shutting down Joel Embiid for the season, shutting down Paul George for the season. Like you have, Utah who is shutting down people and waiting for the end of the season. Like it's just, and then you have teams like Milwaukee, Indiana, the Lakers. You have teams like Minnesota, like that are all playing for something towards the end of the year. They want to make that last push so they can be, instead of the play-in, they want to be in that last playoff spot. Instead of being an away team in the playoffs, they want to be at home, stuff like that. So that's kind of like what I've looked at. I'm like, so now we've gotten to the point in the season where every team has under 20 games left, some even under 15, and we are now seeing what the season takeaways can be for each team. So what I did was, like, for this video, I kind of thought of, let's look at every Western Conference and Eastern Conference team, and let's see what the takeaways from each season are. What are the takeaways so far from this regular season? Or what is like a statement that we can say for each team? So I did the Western Conference and Eastern Conference. I did the Western Conference and Eastern Conference separately. So I have a list that I'm going to do today that is going to be all Western Conference, and I have a list that I'm going to do tomorrow or Monday, and that will be the whole Eastern Conference. And that's kind of what takeaways are. I also have, I want to do another one that's kind of questions we have after the season for each team based on kind of where they ended up, and what we've seen so far this year. But yeah, so today I'm going to do the Western Conference teams, and this is just a statement that I came up with for, what we can say about these teams after the regular season or towards the end of the regular season about what we've learned so far. So I started off just at the top, right? So we got OKC. I just went down the standings from each division, as it's kind of listed on Basketball Reference. So that's kind of what I went with. So first we got OKC, and really for me, the takeaway with this team was that the regular season doesn't matter for them. We know how great they have been this season. But pairing with that, like, I need to see him do it in the playoffs. I need to see Chet healthy going into the first round and what his impact will be. And I need to see what happens when SGA isn't on the floor. If it's something like it is with Boston, like it was the other night, where it's like Chet can command the offense. They didn't have Jalen Williams as well. They didn't have J-Dub as well. So it's one of those things where it's like Chet and Hartenstein are running two-man from the wing, but it's like they're running two-man from the wing as 2 7-footers. Like, it was the craziest thing I'd seen, and Boston didn't have an answer for it. Now, granted, they didn't have Kristaps Porzingis. He's played 50% of the games this year. But in the playoffs, when eventually what people think will be the finals matchup of OKC versus Boston, it's like, will he be there? Will, when, at the end of the day, hopefully, when we have full power versus full power with those two teams, it's like, what really happens? So at the end of the day, it was, the regular season doesn't matter for this team. I need to see what they do in the playoffs. They haven't been a proven playoff team. And this is the season where it's like they have been so much better than last season. They have been heavy favorites, but I need to see what happens when SGA isn't on the floor, and how the offense reacts and how the offense moves and, sustains itself when SGA, their basic primary ball handler, MVP candidate, is off the floor. Second, I had Denver. And then I said they're only as consistent as Jokic allows them to be. So, like, this year's been different than other years. They've, been riddled with injury. Aaron Gordon hasn't played it. He's been in and out of the lineup. Jamal Murray started the year terrible. come out of the Olympics, played terrible for Canada, played terrible at the beginning of the year, and now he's back to, what Jamal looks like. I think he's around like 20-ish, 22-ish a night, but he's been Jamal's one of those dudes where it's kind of like a Cade Cunningham situation, where it's like he's a tough shot taker and tough shot maker. So like when he's not making those shots, like at the beginning of the year, it looks so bad. But then like all of a sudden you switch that to like he's making a couple of those tough jumpers and you're like, okay, he's back. So I think we're getting into that where it's like he's in the groove, he's ready to get into the playoffs, all that stuff. But this team can only be as successful as Jokic allows them to be. It's not a situation like OKC where it's like you have this superstar in Shea and these other dudes can, are super complementary pieces. You have a situation here where it's like you have Jokic, you have Jamal Murray, and MPJ has been inconsistent this year. He's a great shooter, but he's been inconsistent. You have a guy in Aaron Gordon, who's been in and out of the lineup. Russell Westbrook can give you some minutes off the bench, but in a playoff series, how much do you want him doing that? Christian Braun and Russ have both been, they lost to Boston the other week, they lost to Boston because it was, we're going to let you kick out to Christian Braun and Russ. And that's how, if you beat us that way, you beat us that way. And they didn't. So that's what I'm concerned about with this team. But really, it's just they're only as consistent as, like they can only play at the level that Jokic allows them to play at through his play. And he's so much of a floor raiser with that team that it can be the whole way. But like, this isn't a situation where I go into the postseason and I'm like, damn, this team is solidified. I'm stamping them for the Western Conference Finals. I'm stamping them for the finals. It's not like that. And so I don't know. Obviously, Jokic is one of the most consistent players in the league. Awesome in that regard. But there are some things about him that do give me some scares. Or not him. There are things about the Denver Nuggets that give me some scares as we kind of get deeper into the playoffs. Next team I was the T-Wolves. I think that this season, what I really learned was like they lost the trade. Obviously, when they and honestly, both teams, and like I said, I'll talk about New York eventually, but it was one of those things where it was like Julius Randle comes in, and I've always been a hater. Like a Julius Randle hater. Like I think his game is ugly. It's clunky. He's a ball stopper. He's not a continuer. It's kind of like Anthony Simons and how I talk about him. Like the ball comes to him and stops a lot. Now, granted, he's been an all-star and he can do one in that season. He was a great 3-point shooter, but like, do we get that in the playoffs? I don't know. But that's also Minnesota's also a team that I look at as a good matchup for a Denver. Like they have the power to. Like Anthony Edwards is going to get to the rim. Rudy Gobert is one of the best defenders for Jokic. I know he's given him 40, 50 before, but it's like one of those things where he's still one of the best defenders for him individually as a player. It's just how it's like it's just the thing is defensively against Minnesota, but it really just comes down to the trade and the big three on the floor in Gobert, Anthony Edwards, and Julius Randle. Like I don't trust them, and it's Julius Randle. I don't trust Julius Randle in big moments as much as I do Anthony Edwards. And I kind of know what I'm getting from Rudy Gobert. He's just a defensive guy who doesn't give a lot of offensive input or contribute on the offensive end really at all. But that's what I have for them is. They lost the trade, and now we're in a situation where you see Anthony Edwards being forced to be a playmaker, which he needs to get better at. But you made a decision to get rid of Cat, and that has hurt you so far from the eye test, from the statistics, and that's not something that we can just shy away from. It's not something we can just say isn't true or is debatable. Like they have looked pretty objectively worse this year. Now, granted, I've been a huge fan of Jaden McDaniels the last 3 months because he's, developed an offensive game. I think I looked at a stat the other day. He's averaging like 19, 18 points, maybe 17 points after the All-Star break. So if he can continue to do that, I'm going to be a huge Jaden McDaniels fan. But man, like they lost the trade and I want to see them continue to be better, but recently for them has been better and they've been on an uptick. So I'm looking forward to that. Next is Portland. Like I said, this is kind of by division. But for me, the thing we learned from this season is that there is a path and you have a lot of keys to success. You talk about a couple of guys. Toumani Camara is somebody I'm putting major stock in right now. He's got the, ability to be a top defensive guy. He already is a top 10 defensive player, but he's got the capability to take another leap into that tier 1 category with some really big guys. And then you have another guy who's a glue guy, Denny Advia, and you have the pieces that we've talked about, or that I've talked about. Obviously, I tell everybody I know, but like you got Scoot Henderson that scored 30 the other night on the Knicks. You got Shaden Sharp that has scored 30 multiple times this season and needs to be more efficient. But we also have guys that we don't know what we're doing with. You have a Anthony Simons, you have a Jeremy Grant, you have a Rob Will or DeAndre Ayton, whatever we choose to do there. But it's one of those things where it's like we need to choose a path, and they have chosen a path, and it is we're going to continue to play these young guys a ton of minutes, because really Denny's only 24, Tamani's 23, 24 years old. Like I'm putting stock in the Blazers, because the more that I watch them, the more they're starting to look like a Houston, like a OKC 3 to 4 years ago, stuff like that. So that's really what I am seeing with them. And they have kind of chosen direction, and this offseason is going to be huge in terms of solidifying that direction. Utah, they're like we kind of talked about, they're trying to sell games. There's not much to talk about. I don't want to talk about Utah that much. There used to be a big thing with Lauri Markkanen about how awesome he is and how he's so great, blah, blah, blah. He's played bad this year. He has got his money, and he says, I'm good. I'm cool. I don't need to go to a contender. I'm all right. So one of those things where it's just like, Utah's just bad. I'm not watching Utah games. And there's a couple of other teams I'm not watching their games, but Utah's one of them for sure. The Lakers, insane offense when LeBron and Luka are on the floor together. I'm worried about their defense, but that's something that you'll kind of figure out in the playoffs. When the playoffs start, the game slows down a little bit. You really need to run your offensive sets to perfection, and there's not as many fast break opportunities. So I know that they're obviously going to be there with the Lakers, especially with LeBron and Luka both being insane outlet passers. But right now, what I see from them is awesome offense when LeBron and Luka are both at the peak of their power. So that's what I'm really focused on right now. The Warriors. The Warriors was a funny one for me. Steph is playing insane right now, but I watched him the other night play against Sacramento when he got 4,000 threes. Shout out. It's awesome. But it was one of those things where he looked like he was just so fatigued and so hurt. He had his back pad on. He had a heat pad on his back for the whole time he was sitting down. It was just like how much can you ask him to, like, you can't ask him to score 33 a night for the whole playoffs. Jimmy's got to be more effective. Draymond's got to be more effective. Pod's got to be more effective. And I know we're going to get a locked in Jimmy. So my statement here was we will get a locked in Jimmy Butler. He has already been a part of carrying that team to 13-1 now since they've made that trade. But in the playoffs, they're not a team I see doing anything crazy against a Lakers, against a Denver, against I think a Minnesota beats them. I think OKC destroys them. It's one of those things where I'm happy that they are competitive again, because it sucks to see Steph sit in that situation for so long after being so successful. But at the same time, it's like, it's not like this made a huge jump for them to be a contender. That's not where they're at. The Clippers, better than we thought, I think, this season. James Harden has played well. I saw something crazy this aside the other day. Reggie Miller said that James Harden, he was predicting what was going to happen. He was predicting what was going to happen with Steph Curry and James Harden with the 3-pointers. Their career 3-pointers. And Reggie Miller goes, Steph's going to get to 5,000. Hold on. He said Steph's going to get to 5,000. James is going to get to 4,000. And obviously Steph's the first person to ever score 4,000 threes, have 4,000 threes. But James Harden's currently number 2 on the all-time list. And I'm trying to look. He only has 2,974 3-pointers. Like, he hasn't even hit 3,000 yet. And Reggie was like, Reggie was talking as though he was going to get to 4,000. I was like, there's no way. Steph's not getting to 5,000. Steph would have to play another. Yeah, sorry. I'm reading this. I don't know, man. You're at like, I don't think James gets to 4,000. I don't think Steph gets to 5,000. That's a crazy thing to say. I know he's at 4,000 right now, but man, that's so many. Especially when you like look at Steph now play, it's like, how many years does he have left? In reality, like he's tired. I don't know. Anyways, better than we thought. I've also been loving me some Ivica Zubac right now. Zubac has been crazy. I don't know what we're gonna get from Kawhi here in the playoffs, but it's one of those things that I'm looking forward to when I see them in a matchup. I once again don't know how far they're gonna go, or I don't know what's really gonna be the end all be all for this team. But whatever it is, I'm here for it. So next, the Kings. Really like did a 360 almost, like you say teams do like a 180. You're like, oh, this team did a 180, really turned it around. This team did like a 360. Like like when they were like, oh, De'Aaron's gone, like Fox is gone, I was going to be like, okay, perfect. They're going to blow it up. Sabonis is also going to leave. No, you switch, and now you're kind of in like a similar position, but you still have a DeMar DeRozan, you still have Sabonis, you have a Keegan Murray, and you have now a Zach LaVine who was playing terrible at first, couldn't hit threes. I mean, he was playing okay, but he just couldn't hit his threes. The next time, he's playing great. He's back on his bull, like I don't know. One of those things where I was just like, it almost seems like this team just did a full 360. There was no pivot. It was just like almost a pause resume situation. So that's kind of what I took away from them in terms of what I've seen from them post trade. Suns last successful season. That's what I said. Last successful season, I think, for a little while. KD's gone this offseason. A lot of people have been talking about Devin Booker being a for lifer in Phoenix. I don't know if I see that. He's already gone through a terrible stretch with Phoenix, and it took them a long time to make the advances to get to where they were competing for a championship for a good amount of time with CP3, with, Mikal and Cam and those young guys and all this stuff. Like it took them a while to flourish and do that. And now taking a huge step back again, putting all your assets into getting KD and now Beal, who has a no trade clause. It's like, do I want to do this again? Like, and I don't know how much you're going to get for KD. That's really where this all comes down to. I'm not sure how much you're going to get for KD, and I don't want to put a bunch of stake into that. So I think this could be one of their last successful seasons for a little bit here. Next division, this is our last five, but we got Memphis. It's weird because last year when I watched Memphis, it was a lot of pick and roll with Ja and Jaren Jackson, or Ja and whoever the other big was, I can't think of right now for some reason, but now it's like Zach Edey. But now it's like they're running the offense through Jaren, and Ja's taking a pretty big back seat. So it's like he's been scoring a little bit more efficiently and he's been scoring more lately. But at the same time, it's like Jaren has gotten so many nods for, DPOY, Defensive Player of the Year. He's gotten all-star nods. He is, scoring better than he has before. His mid-range post game has been great. Doesn't rebound as much as I like to, but you have Zach Edey on your team, so it's like you have other bigs to be there. But it's one of those things where when it comes down to the playoffs, like I can already kind of tell you what you're going to see. You're going to see a ton of pick and roll, ton of two-man game. Like when you watch Luka and LeBron, you're going to see pick and roll with Luka, kick out to LeBron. You're going to see pick and roll with LeBron, kick out to Luka, and Luka's going to play make. With Giannis and Dame, you're going to see so much pick and roll. With James Harden and Zubac, you're going to see a ton of pick and roll. So it's like, if you're Memphis, do you go back to that in the playoffs because that's what people do and that's what's been reliable and that's how the playoffs work in terms of slowing the offense and not moving as much? Or are you going to continue to run the offense through Jaren Jackson? But if that stalls out, like you have so much practice with Jaren Jackson running the offense this season that it's like to revert right back to, we need to go more ball dominant with Ja and pick and roll. Like, I don't know if that's going to be a seamless transition when you're going into the playoffs and switching back to that style of play is where my head is at currently. The Rockets, I really I looked at it as their window being wide open. They had the second seed for a long time this season. They're still a good team. They're super young. They're super fast. But like when you really look at it, like I've been talking about, in the playoffs, you have to be able to score in the half court. You have to run sets that are super solid and score in the half court. And when I look at when I look at them and I say, oh, Dylan Brooks is your highest 3-point shooter and maker, doesn't speak huge volumes for me. Oh, Jalen Green is your best scorer, a 46% from the field guy, wishy-washy, has a great month here, a bad month here, kind of, back and forth. You have Amen Thompson, who's probably one of the greatest athletes I've seen with my eyes. And you have Sengun, who's an all-star, who's a solid big. But in reality, it's like I see them as just having a wide open window with this team. They have a ton of guys on their bench. Cam Whitmore, I love. Why can't I think of their bench? Like they obviously have Fred as a veteran guy who can kind of lead that team as well. Why can't I think of their bench players? I like a lot of their bench players. Anyways, they got a lot of good bench pieces too. So it's like I see them taking a similar path to an OKC, where it's like you have a 1A guy and a men who really can take that step. He's out for the season, unfortunately, but or out. I don't know if it's out for the season. I think it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Anyways, it's one of those things where it's like you have a guy who can be your 1A and is super awesome and super athletic and great and can run your offense, but like not a great jump shooter. So it's like one of those things where I just think their window is wide open and you have nothing but positivity for this team because they took a huge step up. They also have an incredible coach, Ime Udoka, who, besides off the court issues, just slinging rock, not slinging rock. What am I trying to say? Anyways, they have a great coach in Ime Udoka basketball wise. Human wise, we don't speak on that. Person wise, we don't speak on that. The Mavericks, I have very little words for the Mavericks. It's pretty gross right now. Prayers up to Kyrie. That sucks. Out for the year, torn ACL. I just look at them with they're under a real dark cloud right now. Like it's every NBA team is out there, and then there's a few of these teams like the Mavericks who just have this really dark cloud only under them, raining, thunder and lightning right on top of their head, but everybody else is like, damn, what a nice day outside, 70, and then the Mavs are over here like putting up the umbrella like, dude, this sucks. So that's how I look at the Mavericks right now. Spurs, this year's not the year, but I look at them as another team that's super young. They have a veteran in CP3, and now they have De'Aaron Fox, who can be their guard for the future to pair with Wemby. It's pretty good, and it looks pretty great over there. And Wemby's one of those guys that I think he just makes you a contender. Like he does. Like he just makes you so good. And if he had played the whole year, he's the defensive player of the year. So it's one of those things where it's like, damn, that sucks. And I wish I would have seen him play the whole year because he was doing stuff that I've never seen before. And it was crazy to watch it with my own two eyes. And then the last one, which I shouldn't have done this team last, I should have gone in an order of like least interesting to most interesting, but the Pelicans, man. Which I guess in reality this is interesting because I thought they were going to do something with Zion too. I thought they were going to move off of Zion, and there would be a way that the Blazers could somehow make a move for Zion. Didn't happen. They said we're going to buy in with Zion, and he's obviously one of the best downhill attackers that we've seen in the league. But once again, the Pelicans are one of those teams that are just horribly unlucky. Like you make moves to go get a DeJounte Murray, doesn't work. You have, a CJ McCollum who's solid, bet you in the locker room, doesn't really work. You're probably moving off him this season. You have a couple of highlights where you have a Trey Murphy and you have a, oh my God, why can't I think of his name? Trey Murphy the third, and the other one. Anyways, you have Zion, you have Trey Murphy, and you have his last name starts with an H. Why can't I think of him? Why can't I think of them right now? Why is my computer not loading? Herb Jones. Thank you. Sorry. And you have a Herb Jones. So, like, those two dudes are awesome. Trey Murphy is awesome. Herb Jones is awesome. And Zion's awesome. It's those are three dudes that you can build around and like have positivity towards. Um, but once again, like it's you're just horribly unlucky. You're sitting in the corner and you got a gray cloud over. You're like, dude, we freaking can't get a healthy season with Bi and Zion. Now we got people tearing Achilles. Now we got like, if you would ask me before the season what I thought of the Pelicans, I was like, this roster looks awesome. Like this looks like a competent playoff roster that you're going to see moving forward. They had won the least amount of games of anybody. No, I couldn't have told you that. So that's kind of just how I feel about the Pelicans. Just horribly unlucky, but they're buying on Zion and they're going to make that move long term and deal with some of the health things and the weight and conditioning things that they've talked about. So we'll see. I think next year it'll be interesting, and next year it'll be a little bit like, once again, there's a reason they call it the Wild West. Like every team here has positive things to look at, and that's different from a East that is crazy and injury ridden and weaker, just weaker. Like the West is not like that. So that's kind of how I feel, and that's how that's how I kind of shook out this first half, the first 15 teams at Western Conference. I really tried to think about what each team has going into next year and what they can take away from this year to move forward, but still got the playoffs to go. So that's going to be all for this YouTube video and Team on 3 episode. I'm probably going to try and get something posted tomorrow, if not Monday. Going to be pretty busy this evening, but wanted to get something out while I could. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. And I'll see you next time.